Hey everyone, welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, certified financial planner and owner of Elevation Financial. Thanks for joining me today. Today, we're going to talk a specific part of budgeting, which is a tool that I'm in love with, which is YNAB. YNAB stands for You Need a Budget. It is a software product, and I'm a certified coach in YNAB. I've got a certification in coaching through YNAB. I use the YNAB tool when I do budget coaching with my clients. I use it personally and have for years. I swear by it. I'm a big fan of YNAB. There's lots of tools out there. There's various different tools, and there's no one size fits all, obviously. But I happen to be partial to YNAB. Again, YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, but everyone just says YNAB, YNAB for short. So today we're going to talk about the right way to set up and use YNAB for budgeting. So before anyone gets up in arms, I'm saying the right way, a little bit tongue in cheek, knowing that everyone uses software differently sometimes. I have a certain way I like to use it. I'm going to share my way. And if you use YNAB differently, that's totally fine. If you have a system that works for you, that is totally fine. My way is not the only way or the only correct way, but I do have a system I use that works and that has been working for me for many, many years. I've applied it to working with my clients and they swear by it. They say it works great. I've been able to help my clients get from a state of chaos with cash flow to a state of control and intention and peace with their cash flow. And this system has worked for them. So again, don't get mad at me if you use YNAB differently. Totally fine. I'm going to just present my way. That is one example way of using YNAB that I consider the right way. And again, I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek. All right. So YNAB is a software product that you sign up for at ynab.com, and you can use it on the web or on mobile. I use both personally. I use on the web when I'm doing more kind of detailed work, but I do a lot on mobile as well. Every couple of days, I'm in the mobile app, categorizing and getting things up to date. So I like both. The mobile app is a little more heavily used, in my opinion, just because it's easier, but you can use both. So I'm going to talk about how to get it set up. So first of all, I'm going to kind of just assume all the basic stuff, which is if you don't use YNAB, you can go to ynab.com. There's a free trial for about a month you can use. If you're a client of mine, I can give you 2 months free trial. But anyway, there's a free trial for the public, and you sign up, you get a budget set up, and you start using it by importing your bank accounts. You link up your bank accounts and you start categorizing and planning your budget. So I am going to talk first about account structure. So when it comes to account structure, I have a very specific banking structure that I like to use. Again, this is just my way. You can do it differently if you want, but I think there's a lot of merit to the way I like to recommend setting up your banking. And the banking structure is this. So when you're setting up first of all, I'll go back to banking structure. So banking structure in general, one operating account for the household. So household can be just you. Household can be you and a spouse. Household can be you and a spouse and kids. Like that's your household. Whatever your household is, you've got one operating account. This is your checking account. I prefer this to be at a brick and mortar bank just because it's nice to have at least one bank that is brick and mortar that you can go to if you need something that's local to you. I prefer regional banks or larger credit unions. And so that's going to be your operating account. That's the account you have your debit card attached to that you swipe. That's going to be the account paychecks go into, expenses go out of, your everyday operating account for cash flow in and out. So that's your main account. Then I also like to have a short-term savings account that is at a different bank. So your short-term savings is for your emergency fund. It also is for things like larger purchases, maybe a down payment on a home in the future, or large appliances, or buying a new car, or just big expenses. Again, these may not be practical for everyone, but they're just examples. So your short-term savings, I like to have that at a separate bank, preferably an online high-yield bank, because brick and mortar banks typically don't pay much in the way of interest. But there are plenty of online banks that pay high yield and a lot of interest, especially right now, depending on when you listen. And so I prefer that to be an online bank, which is separate from your brick and mortar bank. You may be asking why that seems inconvenient. Well, it's inconvenient on purpose. We want to have a little bit of a barrier between your operating account and your short-term savings. we want it to take a couple days to transfer money back and forth. That way you're not randomly grabbing money from your short-term savings because it's so low friction. We want to intentionally wall that off and set it aside for specific things. So that's your short-term savings. Again, it's going to be your emergency fund, and anything on top of the balance you've earmarked for your emergency fund is going to be for other big expenses or even irregular expenses, things like annual HOA fees or things like that. Then I also like to have a travel and vacation account. And yes, I like to have this at yet a different bank. And I use an online bank that has a debit and, a checking and a savings account with it and a debit card attached so that I can use that to spend out of for vacations. And I like to have a travel and vacation account specifically because if there's one thing I've seen just blow up people's cash flow and their budget is vacations and travel. For some reason, when we're traveling, everything just goes out the window. Spending is out of control. Budget just blows up. We get in debt. I've seen it over and over and over again. So we'll get to this a little bit later in the budget discussion, but I like to have a regular amount going into the travel and vacation account. And that is a bucket of money set aside just for travel and vacation. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then if you are a business owner, I like to have a tax account because you need to pay quarterly estimated tax payments. If you are a sole proprietorship, an LLC, part of a partnership, part of an S Corp, anything other than a C Corp, basically means you're a pass-through entity, which means that your business is not taxed. You are taxed personally. And so I like to have a separate tax account that I can save into on a regular basis and then pay quarterly estimated taxes out of that. Now, you business owners might be thinking, well, I just pay my quarterly estimates out of my business account. You can do that. It's not technically best practice, though. Technically, since you are taxed personally, you want to pay out of a personal account. Again, not a hill I'm going to die on or split hairs about, but the correct way technically is to pay from a personal account. So that tax account is set aside for estimated taxes. And again, yes, that's yet a different bank. I like to have different banks for all of these for walling off specific intention behind the accounts. So that's my banking structure. You might have more accounts than that. You might have less, but I encourage you to make sure you're intentional about it and you have exactly the right amount of accounts that you need and you don't have random accounts with no purpose just laying around. All right. So that's the banking structure. Now, when you're setting up YNAB, it's going to ask you to link up accounts. Oh, by the way, I'll come back for a minute. I realize that most of you listening use credit cards. I personally don't use credit cards. I'm crazy. A lot of people think I'm just a total weirdo because I don't use credit cards. Most people do. I get that. So your credit card will also be kind of in the same category as your operating account. So if you do use credit cards for daily stuff, then you can think of your operating account plus your credit card as kind of your spending accounts. We'll talk a little bit more about credit cards also in a minute. So now let's move to the next section of our discussion, which is setting up YNAB with your accounts. When you are setting up YNAB, it's going to ask you to link accounts. I encourage you to only link your operating checking account. And if you do use credit cards, link only the credit card or credit cards that you use on a daily basis. So let's say you have a checking account at a local bank, and then you also have two credit cards that you use, maybe one that you use, one your spouse uses, or maybe you use two cards, one for something and one for something else. So let's just assume that. You're going to link up your checking account and both credit cards as budget accounts. That means that transactions that happen on those accounts or cards will show up in your budget as cash flow. Again, if you don't use credit cards, it's really simple. You just have one checking account and your debit card is what's used. If you have credit cards, use those. I encourage you to not have multiple checking accounts that you use for operating accounts. I've seen this just get really, really cumbersome. And I've seen people have like 2 or 3 different checking accounts in YNAB and they have to transfer money between them and balances get all weird. And it's just a big hassle. So if at all possible, I strongly encourage you to have only one checking account that's your operating account. Not 2, not 3. One will keep life very simple and much smoother. So those are linked up. Now, what you're going to do with the other accounts you have, your short-term savings, your travel and vacation account, your tax account if you're a business owner, you're going to add these as tracking accounts. Tracking accounts do not show up in your cash flow. So you'll see transactions happen in the ledger and you can approve those and see them, but an expenditure coming out of a tracking account will not come out of your budget. A deposit into your tracking account will not add to your budget. And that's by design. That's how these accounts work. They're just purely to see the balance. So you're going to add your short-term savings as a tracking account, your travel and vacation as a tracking account. Again, if you're a business owner, your tax account is a tracking account. And you do that in the software by adding it as a tracking account in the account configuration. You scroll to the bottom, choose asset. And then once it's added, you then right click it and choose link. And then you'll link it up to the bank to see the balance in real time. So it's kind of a two-step process. It's a little weird, but you want to be sure you add those as tracking accounts because those are buckets of money that you're going to flow money into, but it's going to leave your budget and then go in that bucket and live in that bucket. So that's how you set up those tracking accounts. If you have credit cards that carry a balance that you're paying down, add those as tracking accounts. Do not add those in your budget. If you have a credit card that you're still using, that you carry a balance and you're not paying it off month to month, I encourage you to stop using it, move it to a tracking account, and then work toward paying it off little by little. All right. So once that is set up, you've got your system of your operating account or accounts if you have credit cards, and then your tracking accounts are the buckets that you can use to hold money. Next, you want to configure the categories. So the next section of our process is going to be to set up your budget with specific categories. I do have on my website a different blog post about how to set up a budget with categories for household spending. You can look for that, and that will give you my template. It's a spreadsheet you can even link to and grab all the categories. I use three big broad groupings. I use a grouping called life goals, a grouping called household operations, and a grouping called discretionary spending. I like those three groupings because it helps you kind of itemize where things fall in the grand scheme of things. Life goals are things like saving into your short-term savings, investing or retirement savings, kids 529 accounts, if that's applicable, travel and vacation savings, charitable giving, anything that's a life goal type of thing, a big important thing that you want to invest money into. Doesn't mean always literally investing into like an investment account, although it could be. It could just be investing into your short-term savings or investing into charitable giving, something that's a life investment. Then household operations are things that are necessary to operate your household. I like having it as a separate grouping because if you separate that from discretionary spending, you can very clearly at a glance see what it takes to truly operate your household if you had to kind of cut back a little bit and go to the bare minimum. So it's useful to see what it takes to really operate your household. So this is things like your mortgage or rent, your groceries and household supplies, gas for the car, transportation, auto insurance, utilities, things like that, internet, cell phones, health insurance, stuff like that. That's just sort of necessary things you need to operate the household, things that are non-negotiable. Then the discretionary spending grouping is for things that are discretionary. This is where eating out goes, clothing and accessories, gifts, streaming TV services, general family or kids activities. Most software subscriptions would probably go there. Fitness and wellness. I mean, some of these could be argued it's up to you to decide what's necessary and what's not. So you might put some of these things into household operations. That's up to you. But in general, we want to put things in discretionary that is truly discretionary, entertainment, things like that. So those are your three groupings, and that's where you can set up those budget categories. Again, on my website, if you search budget on my website, you'll find the blog post that has my template you can use as a starting point. So you're going to set up your budget and configure all those categories. Next, you're going to start using it. You're going to let transactions flow in, and you're going to categorize transactions. So as categories flow in, or as transactions flow in, you're going to categorize them into one of these budget items. So again, when you see your mortgage transaction flow in, you're going to assign that to mortgage. When you buy groceries, you're going to assign that to groceries. So you're going to categorize every transaction that comes in, and you're going to put it into a budget category. In the first couple of weeks, as you're configuring YNAB, you're going to start to get a sense of how much you truly spend in these areas. So I would just put guesses in place. So for every assigned budget item, just put a guess. So for example, if you think you spend $800 a month on groceries, just put in 800 for now as a wild guess. And then you'll adjust it over time. I also like to have targets on just about everything. So when you click on a budget category, you can see that you can assign what's called a target to it. And a target means that's kind of the template amount that you're going to assign to it on a regular basis. So some of these are easy, like your rent or mortgage. That's fixed every month. So when you click on the mortgage budget item, you're going to say, hey, my target is X per month. That's exactly what I need to spend. It comes out on the first, and your target's ready to go. What targets also do is they let you auto assign in one fell swoop. So if I have targets assigned to every single budget item in my budget, every month I can just click assign at the top and just boom, assign it all at once. And everything is funded, so to speak, or everything is kind of assigned in one fell swoop. I can also click individually. I can click on a budget item and say, just, click underfunded. It'll boom, it'll fund it immediately with the target item. So go ahead and assign budget amounts, and then you'll adjust over time and you'll figure it out as you kind of get up and running. So that's going to be helpful. All right. So let's talk about how tracking accounts fit into your budget now, because remember, we set up those tracking accounts as non-budget accounts. They don't show up in transactions. They're just buckets of money. So a lot of these are going to be in life goals. Actually, the two accounts we talked about are going to be in life goals. So for life goals, you might have a budget item like I do called short-term savings. And that short-term savings line item is where you assign how much money you're going to transfer out of your operating account into your savings account. And so let's say you assign $300 a month that goes into short-term savings because you want to continually build up your savings. So you're going to have a line item called short-term savings. Mine's under life goals, and it's going to say $300 assigned as a budget item. And then when you transfer money out of your operating account into your savings account, it's going to show up as an expenditure out of your account. So you're going to assign that to the category short-term savings when that transaction shows up. It's just like a bill you're paying, just like a utility bill or a rent payment or something, or a car payment, just like that. It's simply money flowing out, and it has a specific purpose. Same thing with travel and vacation. Let's say you're transferring $200 a month from your operating account into your travel and vacation account. Same thing. You're going to assign $200 to that budget item. And then every month when the money transfers out, it's going to show up as an expenditure out, just like any other bill. And it's going to be assigned to travel and vacation. And then as an aside, when you want to go on vacation, you simply look at your travel and vacation account and see how much is there. Oh, a couple $1,000s are there. Let's go on a vacation to XYZ location. We can afford that. And that's where you spend out of. And that's how you book the flights or the travel expenses, the hotels. It all comes there, never hits your budget. It's a really, really clean way of making sure you can travel and feel great about it and not have it blow up your budget. This system really, really works. Trust me on this. So there you go. Again, things like retirement savings. Let's say you're saving into a Roth IRA. That's going to be in life goals. So you have a line item. Mine's called long-term investing / retirement. I've got a certain amount of money coming out into my Roth IRA at that point. That's going to show up there as a budget item. So any tracking account you have is just a bucket of money to hold stuff, and you move money out of your operating account, out of your budget into those accounts. Easy peasy. So this is a little bit nitty gritty. You're going to have to use YNAB to really get a sense of this. It's hard for me to describe just kind of talking like this, but the ready to assign number at the top is what you have available to assign. So you want that to always be green or 0. If it's red, it means you're budgeting more than you have available and you got to fix something. So that's more of a nuanced kind of thing to figure out and work on and kind of get to know, but that's basically how it works. So when you're spending, you're looking at your budget, you're saying, oh, I've got $300 this month left over in groceries. That's kind of my limit. If you go over, you've got to pull the money from some other category and make it work. All right. Now, as you're using your budget, it's really important to keep it up to date. So what I've seen happen a lot of times is that many people will start to use YNAB. They'll get really excited. They'll use it for a couple of weeks and then they'll forget about it and they won't open the app for 3 months. And then suddenly they'll think, oh, wait, I haven't used my budget. They'll open it up. They've got 500 transactions to categorize. They get overwhelmed. They close it, never open it again. I've seen that happen so many times. Don't let that happen. Open your budget on the app every couple days. All it takes is just open the app, look at your transactions, categorize them. It literally takes 30 seconds and your budget stays up to date. And then you adjust. Maybe you go over budget in a category. You move money around to accommodate. For example, let's say you are $50 over your eating out budget. Okay, so you've got to cover it by allocating enough to cover that spending amount. And maybe you pull it from groceries because you ate out more than you cooked at home this month. No big deal. So keep it up to date. Keep the app on your phone. Let notifications be allowed on the app so it pops up and tells you when there's things to categorize. Keep it up to date. Every 2 to 3 days is great. Just open it and categorize. And so now you're kind of at the point where you're managing cash flow. You're able to open your app, you're able to see what you have to spend. You're seeing inflow come in as, paychecks or deposits come in. You assign that money out to your budget items. You are making decisions based on what's available. And at this point, it's really cool because what a lot of people do before using YNAB is they just look at their bank account balance and they use that as a barometer of what they can spend. But that's a lie, because when you look at your bank balance, you're not taking into account the car payment that's auto drafting later that day, the mortgage payment that's coming out in 3 days, the check you wrote to your kid's school 2 days ago is going to be cashed tomorrow. All the stuff that's coming due or is out there pending already, not showing up. And that's why people kind of get in cash flow crunches, because they don't account for all the stuff they don't see when they're looking at their bank balance. So YNAB lets you predict those things, plan for those things, forecast those things, and you're ready to assign number, and what's in your budget is your true available amount. As you get to use the system more and more, what I encourage people to also start doing is to start manually adding transactions as much as possible. So when I go get gas now, I open up the app. When the gas is in the car, it's all done. I look at the total on the gas pump. Let's say it says $47.60. I'm going to open my app. I'm going to manually enter $47.60 at, Speedway or whatever, and I'm going to enter it as a manual transaction. That immediately updates my spending number and shows me where I am in my budget. And then a couple days later, when it flows in, it'll match up and just kind of link it to that transaction I did manually. But it lets me keep it up to date in real time versus waiting a day or two for transactions to flow in. So again, it seems high maintenance, but it's not that much. And once you get in the habit, it's very empowering. Enter transactions as they happen. Not everyone, you can't always do everything, but it helps you stay more up to date. So you're managing cash flow now. You're being very intentional. You're seeing transactions. You're seeing where the spending is. You're adjusting your budget, and it's extremely empowering. So what if something glitches? A lot of people ask, well, I got stuck because, I tried to reconcile and things got off. So let me talk about reconciling first, and then we'll talk about glitches. So you want to reconcile on a regular basis. I reconcile every Friday. I just have a reminder set up to reconcile. Yes, I'm a total nerd. By this point, you're realizing I'm just like a crazy nerd about this stuff, but it gets really satisfying if you really get into it. And it's so satisfying to be so in control of your money. So every Friday I click on the bank account, my operating account, which is the budget account, and I click on reconcile. And what it does is it links up with the bank and it says, hey, what is your current balance? Does it match what the YNAB ledger thinks it is? Usually it'll match up and you say good to go. If it doesn't, some people kind of get, overwhelmed at this point. It's perfectly okay to just adjust with a journal entry. Sometimes what happens is bank feeds will glitch, they'll stop working, you've got to reconnect, and there might be a day or two where the reconnect, is kind of floating and maybe it misses a transaction or something. It happens. It's okay. What you do, YNAB will say, do you want to make a journal entry to reconcile? You say yes, make a journal entry, because you're going to plug in your current balance and tell YNAB what your current balance truly is, and it'll just do a journal entry and you'll get caught up. Don't be afraid to do that. That's okay. Reconcile and move on. Make a journal entry, reconcile, and move on. You want to keep your budget properly up to date and in sync with your bank's current balance. Not available balance, but current balance. YNAB will coach you on this, but I want to make sure you really know this. When you look at your bank, you've got two balances, you've got available and current. You want to make sure you put your current balance in as the reconciled amount in YNAB. All right, so glitches happen. It's okay. You can journal entry it and move on. So this is how I recommend setting up YNAB. Now, I've described a system that is kind of one way. It's simplified. It's either relevant if you are a single person just using your own budget, or you're a married couple with combined finances. You can also use it as a married couple with either hybrid or separate finances. If you're separate finances, you're each going to have your own budget. That's fine. That's how you would do it. And you would just run your own budgets and just kind of split money as you need to. If you're in a hybrid system, you can run 3 budgets. You can have a household budget where you share together household expenses, and you can also have separate budgets if you want to for your own spending. So it's perfectly fine to do that. So don't be afraid to kind of make different budgets depending on how you structure your household if you're in a relationship. So that is the structure I recommend. Again, not the only one, not the one size fits all, but the size that seems to fit a lot of people I work with and that has a lot of value because it keeps your budget simple, it keeps the account structure simple, and it sets aside buckets of money for specific things that you can visually see the balance filling up and gives you a very tangible visual of how much money you have in this short-term savings bucket. How much money do you have in your travel and vacation bucket? Your tax account you can just pay out of immediately on IRS .gov/pay when it's time for quarterly taxes if you're a business owner. It's really, really easy to make these things work and lowers your stress and keeps you much more organized. Back to credit cards for a minute. YNAB handles credit cards just fine. So if you use a credit card, you spend on a credit card, no problem. It'll show up in your budget. You'll categorize transactions. When you make a payment, it'll flow in and call it a payment. You just classify it as a payment if it doesn't already, and it'll just kind of move the money from your checking to the credit card appropriately, and it'll all balance out. So credit cards work fine. As you may know, I am personally not a fan of credit cards. I don't use them. I don't think they're always bad, but I've seen too many people have complexity, issues, spending problems, all sorts of just issues happen with credit cards. So use them sparingly if you can. Don't have 17 credit cards that all carry a balance. Keep it simple. All right. So that is my system for setting up YNAB the right way. Again, a little bit joking. I know that may not be the way you do it, but this is the right way I like to do it. And that I think is very, very organized and visually rational in a way to kind of see where your money flows. All right. So with that, as a reminder, I don't really like to sell my services on this podcast, but I'm going to go ahead and say I do budget coaching if you're my client. So that's something that I do. So if you feel overwhelmed and stuck and you're just like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I get the concept, but still feel stuck. I want some coaching. I do provide that. So feel free to reach out if you want. All right. With that, feel free to reach out anytime with any questions. You can find me on my website at elevationfinancial.com. I'm on pretty much every social platform. If you want to consider becoming a client or ask me more questions in general, you can book a free consultation on my website, again, at elevationfinancial.com. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.